Um, we are really going to dig in and I'm going to help you explore the genetics behind tic disorders and what it means for your child and how they are affected by their genetics. In addition, I want to make sure that parents have all the resources available to them when it comes to their kids and any conditions that they might be experiencing. So let's dig in. When we are looking at genes, it is not from the standpoint of, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. There are, oh my gosh, I'm going to die genes that people get really scared about. And then there are genes that are not, oh my gosh, I'm going to die genes. I do not look at, oh my gosh, I'm going to die genes. So, is there a gene that predisposes your child to a tic disorder? In short, no. Although many genes have been studied, there is not a standalone gene that is influencing a tic. So when I am looking at genes, I am looking at them to instead help you analyze your child's genes to create a roadmap. You guys hear me talk about all of the time how I connect the dots and create this roadmap to guide you on what you need to remove and what you need to reinforce within your child's life to help them experience optimal wellness. So as we're looking at that, nutrigenomics, which is what I do, which is what I specialize in. So I am one of the corporate clinical educators for GX Sciences. I teach doctors, nurse practitioners, chiropractors, other providers how to use and analyze this data in their practice. And what I will tell you is there is so much misinformation on the internet when it comes to looking at genetics. So let's take a look at tic disorders. Tics can run in families, but you may also find that your child has a tic and no one else in your family does. So, this is where we take your child's individual genes and look at how diet, environment, and nutrient deficiency might be impacting their symptoms. For example, you have on and off switches for inflammation, which have a direct impact on your child's tics. We also have to connect those on and off switches to what else is going on inside your child's body. So when we look at your individual ability to turn on and off inflammation, we can see if your child might be predisposed to chronic aggressive inflammation. I know mine is. I know I am. I know most of the people in my house are. So if that's the case, we can really refine diet and lifestyle to reduce inflammation. But we have to know what those inflammatory triggers are. We can't just look at genes as a standalone. You have to understand that genetics or genomics is just one piece of that puzzle. It is not that standalone thing that we're looking at. We are going to look at that in conjunction with everything else that's going on in the body. This is where the holistic approach comes in. Holistic is not, I'm going to rub my crystals on you and sage you. Holistic is looking at the whole body, how all of the body systems are connected. That is what we're going to do. And part of that is looking at the genetics. So in the case of chronic aggressive inflammation, we can really look at what are those triggers of inflammation for your child and what are their genetics saying? What do we need to do to support them? We can also look at your body's ability to recycle cellular waste. If your child has poor cellular recycling, we can refine our diet and environment to improve cellular recycling. So nothing else is getting in when we have a lot of cellular waste. So I tell parents, like, think of it like a water balloon. If you have a lot of cellular waste in your cells, it's like a water balloon. Nothing else can get in. So as parents, when we're Googling and throwing in all of these different supplements and nutrients, and then we're getting really frustrated because nothing is working. If your child has a lot of inflammation and cellular waste, nothing else is getting in. But we have to be able to look at why that is happening. Is there genetic predisposition? And are there triggers that are contributing to that? What do we need to remove and what do we need to reinforce? Okay. This is why I use genetics. If you drive on a bridge every single day to work, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, but that bridge has a crack in it and that bridge is full of hazards. So there's tires and there's trash and there's dead skunks and there's people's bumpers that have fallen off. You have a lot of hazards on your bridge. So you would call your city and be like, hey, you got to clean up this mess and you have to reinforce this crack. It's dangerous. That's how we use genetics. We're looking at genetics for what we need to remove and what cracks we need to reinforce. What are those hazards? What needs to go? But what also needs to be reinforced? Where are those cracks? And then we can really look at, that genetic predisposition for things like poor energy production, poor nutrient use. Um, One of the things that you guys probably Google a lot, I have a lot of parents tell me this, is take a breath before I say it. MTHFR. Yes, the mother effer gene. Let's talk a little bit about the mother effer gene and where there's so much misinformation on the internet. So, yes, MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. So, we have a chain of genes. It's methylation, and it's basically how well our body utilizes folate. We are taking a water soluble vitamin, doing enzyme conversions, converting it to a fat soluble vitamin so that it can get into our cells. When we have this chain, there is a chain. So think of it like, a chain, maybe your necklace, maybe, you're going to chain your fence, a chain, it's all connected. We are going to look at all of these genes in the chain. MTHFR, last gene in the chain, very, very last gene in the chain. So genes are not a standalone. You cannot just look at genetics and say, ooh, they have MTHFR or they don't have MTHFR. And one gene does not make a disaster. One gene is not the end of the world. You have to look at how all of the other genes are connected. So MTHFR is the hot, sexy gene. Everybody knows it. Maybe your doctor tests it. Maybe you've run out and gotten a 23andMe and tested it. But do you really understand how it impacts your child's health? I look at 35 to 55 different genes when I'm working with patients. And so when I'm looking at those genetics, I'm able to connect those dots. So it's not just one gene. You have to know how B12 plays into that. You have to know how glutathione, your body's number one antioxidant, plays into that. You have to know how well your body is delivering B12 and folate in this process. You have to make sure that you are looking above and beyond one gene. So I'll tell you, people will be like, well, I've been tested for MTHFR and I don't have it. Yeah, let's test the rest of that chain. And when we look at the rest of that chain, there's a lot of broken links. There's a lot of cracks that need to be reinforced. So when we're only looking at one gene, we are missing a gigantic piece of the puzzle. Okay? So when you're Googling the mother effer, when you're Googling MTHFR, there's a lot of misinformation about the impact, about MTHFR just being this one singular gene. There's lots of MTHFRs. There's more than just one, and they have a different impact. And then I look at clinical percentages. So our genes actually tell us a lot about our need for certain nutrients and vitamins. Like I said, I do see some issues with folate and B12. Here's what I'll tell you. You cannot just test MTHFR and say you need folate. Because if you put folate into a system that is already inflamed, whether it's aggressive inflammation, cellular waste, whatever the case may be, if you put folate into a system that's already inflamed, you are going to feel worse before you feel better. This is where a lot of parents get frustrated. Things got a lot worse. Well, we added in these supplements and things got worse and we don't know why. Well, it's because you're not doing these steps. You're not looking at the genetics in the way that they need to be looked at in comparison with everything else. So we can also look at, like I said, I look at between 35 and 55 different genes. We look at how they are impacted. Our genes are impacted by environmental factors like toxins and even certain foods. So when we're using our genes like a roadmap, we can determine if your child is getting rid of toxins. Remember, we talked about we have to have folate, B12, in order to create glutathione, your body's number one antioxidant. But do they create enough glutathione in the first place? Are they able to detoxify within the neurological system? Are there things that we can do to help them along if they are not good detoxifiers? If you're not a good detoxifier, you should avoid toxins. Everybody should avoid toxins, but especially if you are not a good detoxifier. We can look at your genes and we can figure that out. So, when we are looking at toxins, it's not just chemical toxins. People think bleach. Not just chemical toxins, pesticides, herbicides. You have to look at things like medications. Medications impact your genes very, very differently, and it's different for everybody. Some people are what we call a slow metabolizer, which means those medications may build up in your system because you can't detoxify them. And then you have more side effects because you have more of this medication in your system. So you could, besides the chemicals and the medications, you have to also think about endotoxins. We did an episode TikTok Tuesday on toxins, but endotoxins are the toxins that are being made inside your body by, microbiome imbalance, bacteria, infections, candida, these kinds of things. They create their own toxins. So you have to look at well, what's going on in the body besides just, okay, well, I've taken out the bleach, taken out the, the Glade plugins, but what's going on inside the body? Are we creating our own toxins? We can actually look at genetics and look at all of these considerations, but you have to look at the genes with the other testing. So if you want to look at genes, it's not just one gene. Like I said, I'm looking at between 35 and 55 genes. So, we know you run out, you try magnesium and B6. If we're looking at genetics and we're looking at other testing, we can decide, well, is magnesium and B6 really what your child needs? Are there other things that the body needs? So genes help us look for what needs work in the body. And we can see that with tic disorders with greater clarity. We can get clear on, okay, we're not looking at some specific gene. Oh my gosh, you're just going to have a tic disorder. No, we're looking at how your environment, how your diet influences your genetics, and how your genetics influence how you're going to react to that diet and that environment. So there's so much misinformation about genetics. I will tell you, so many people are like, oh, 23andMe. Oh, I've got me a 23andMe. Yes, you can. You can run down to the store. You can grab yourself that 23andMe. Probably cost you like 99 bucks. Sometimes it's on sale. It is a novelty test. It is a novelty test because it's not looking at who you are, who your child is as an individual, and then comparing and contrasting that to their health history, to their symptoms, and to other testing. They're just saying, ooh, you have MTHFR, you don't. They're not saying, hey, these are all of the other genes in that chain that have this impact. So, hold on, Sharon, I'll answer this question. So when we're looking at it, MTHFR, one gene, last gene in the chain, is one of the things that drives me absolutely bonkers when it comes to genetics, is because it's the last gene in the chain. It is not going to be the thing that impacts your tic disorder. It may be the thing that impacts the fact that you're not utilizing folate, and maybe you're not making enough serotonin and dopamine. And we're going to look above and beyond that. We're going to look at how well do you utilize glutamates? How well do you utilize histamines? Do you have a histamine issue? How well do you proliferate probiotics in the gut? Should you be eating gluten and dairy? How well do you detoxify? How well do you get rid of cellular waste? So we're looking at all of these different factors when it comes to genetics. So I really feel passionately about genetics. Like I said, it is one of my favorite topics. But I think there's so much misinformation, especially when we start Googling. And I want you to understand that when I'm using genomics, I'm using it to look at how diet and lifestyle impact your genes and how your genes impact your diet and lifestyle. What do we need to remove? And what do we need to reinforce to give your child optimal health? All right, for those of you just joining, we're going to do question and answers in just a minute. But for those of you joining, we always offer a free initial consultation call. You can book a call at the top of this page. Facebook says book a call. You can grab that link. If you want to hop on the call with my intake specialist, drop the word call, and I will get you that link. I will tell you those calls fill up really, really quickly. So drop that. We also have tons and tons and tons of free bingeable information on our website, www.regenerating.health. So there is a blog. There is a podcast. I think we're 8 to 12 episodes in on the podcast published at this point. There's also a page called Media with all of my interviews, articles, things like that. So you can go over and binge all of that free content. We are here about natural approaches. We're not talking about medications. We're not talking about this or that. We are talking about how to reduce tic disorder symptoms naturally. So tons of free info over at regenerating.health.